Gross-Rosen is located in western Poland. It's about a 3-hour drive from Prague, about a 3.5-hour drive from Krakow, and about a 4-hour drive from Warsaw. In this aerial view on the left, you can see the main part of the camp and the adjoining quarry. The main gate is here where the pink star is. Everything to the right of this would have been part of the SS camp, and everything to the left would have been part of the prisoners' camp. The parking lot is here, and after a short walk, we'll come to the former SS canteen building, which used to house the SS kitchen, mess hall, and casino. Now it houses the Gross-Rosen Museum. In the photo to the right, we've zoomed in to the main part of the camp, which we'll be taking a closer look at. From this view, we are inside the former SS grounds. The main gate to the prisoners' camp is straight ahead. To the right are the remains of the former SS canteen, which we'll go to next. These pictures are from the lower level of the former SS canteen. On the upper level is the present-day museum. During its first year of operation, from 1940 to 1941, Gross-Rosen was a subcamp of Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Gross-Rosen became its own independent camp in 1941, and one of its main roles was using prisoners as free labor to mine the local quarry. As you enter the museum, there hangs a large depiction of a sculpture in memory of the victims of Gross-Rosen. To the right is a zoomed-in picture so that you can see the detail. These are stained glass windows near the entrance to the museum. To the left, you can see a striped prisoner's uniform with a red triangle superimposed on top of a yellow triangle. That would identify this prisoner as a Jewish political prisoner. To the right are examples of footwear, including wooden clogs. Can you imagine trying to work in a quarry with wooden clogs? In the bottom photo, we see a striped hat and some of the tools used in the quarry. Starting in the upper left, prisoners were given metal tags with their prisoner number on it. These were attached to string and worn around the neck. Below, we can see a cup, 2 spoons, and a fork that were used by inmates. And to the right, we have a couple of armbands with prisoner numbers on them. This case shows photographs of some of the men sent to Gross-Rosen. And below the photos, we can see some of the personal items that were found in the camp. This exhibit shows some of the doctors that were stationed at Gross-Rosen at some point. You may recognize the doctor to the far right, Dr. Josef Mengele, who was well known at Auschwitz-Birkenau for his horrific experiments on twins. He was also one of the men who decided the fate of newly arrived men, women, and children with a wave of his hand. sending them either in one of two directions, to work or to the gas chamber. From the museum, we'll follow this path over to the quarry before backtracking to the main gate. As we enter the quarry area, we come to this stone that has Polish writing on it. It reads, "Here in the years 1940 to 1945, they worked, suffered, and died. Prisoners of the Gross-Rosen concentration camp. Whatever you hate that someone else should do to you, see that you do not do it to another." Book of Tobias. This is a view of the massive quarry area. Because of the hard physical labor required when working in the quarry, in addition to the high risk of accidents and injuries, prisoners assigned to this area had the highest mortality rate. One of the signs in the area even said that one's lifespan averaged less than 5 weeks if you were assigned to the quarry. Here are a couple of other pictures that give you an idea of the scale and depth of the quarry. This is one of the cranes that remains at the quarry. There are actually several cranes, and on the picture to the right, you can see how the cables run from one side to the other. In front of the main gate are a few memorials that we'll take a look at. And then as we enter the camp, we'll cross this large open area, which is the roll call square, on our way over to the prisoner's kitchen. From there, we'll head to the far back corner to the location of the former crematorium. Prisoners constructed this main gate. Above the passageway, you can see the phrase, "Arbeit macht frei," meaning work sets you free. The phrase is found on gates of several concentration camps. During the 5 years in operation, over 125,000 passed through its gates. Initially, a majority of the inmates were German and Polish political prisoners. Later, there was an influx of Jewish inmates when ghettos were liquidated and when prisoners were transported from other camps to Gross-Rosen. Before you pass through the main gate, to the right, there is a monument to the victims of Gross-Rosen and mining carts that were used in the quarry. Part of the sign above says that this is the historic quarry, the site of slavery and cruel labor for thousands of Gross-Rosen concentration camp inmates who were citizens of dozens of countries. This is another part of the monument to the victims of Gross-Rosen. To me, it's one of the most powerful yet haunting sculptures I have ever seen. As we pass through the main gate, we can see the bell tower in the distance and the remains of the prisoner's kitchen. This used to actually be a 2-story building. And then we have this large open field in front, which is where they would have roll call. Next to the roll call area, we find the reconstructed gallows, which is where prisoners were hung. To the far right are the remains of an electrified fence post. The posts are actually quite tall, but in this middle picture, they almost look like little matchsticks lining the border behind the kitchen. To the left is the bell tower, and if you look closely, you can just make out the suspended bell. The original bell tower was destroyed in a storm in 2002, so this replica was built. The photo in the top right is inside the kitchen building, and you can see these large cement basins. And down here on the right, lower, are rectangular outlines of where barracks once stood. To the left are the remains of the concrete foundation of Block 19, which housed the penal company. To the right are the remains of Block 22, which was the convict labor camp. To the right is a crematorium oven. Originally, there was a mobile field crematorium that was able to burn 10 bodies a day. Eventually, that crematorium could not keep up with the demand, so a larger crematorium with 3 ovens was built, the foundation of which is seen to the left. Near the crematorium is an area where an execution wall once stood. Now that area is lined with various plaques commemorating those who lost their lives here. The plaque to the left lists the names of Catholic clergy who were victims of Gross-Rosen. In this expanded view, we can see the remains of the crematorium and the memorial plaques. So let's just review where we've been. We have visited the SS Canteen, and that's where the museum was. We went over to the quarry and the main gate. And then we saw the roll call square, the prisoner's kitchen. We went down here to the crematorium and commemorative plaques. And now we'll look at the mausoleum, another memorial at the far end, the remains of the Auschwitz camp, and a standing barrack. The mausoleum, seen on the left, contains ashes that were retrieved near the crematorium. There are plaques in different languages along the front, and they read, "Mausoleum of prisoners of all European countries who were murdered by the Nazi barbarians. It was raised by the state of Poland in 1953. On either side of the mausoleum is a wall with the names of subcamps of Gross-Rosen. One of the subcamps was Brunlitz, and it's spelled Brunnlitz. It's located in Czechoslovakia. If you have seen the movie Schindler's List, this is the camp at the end of the movie where Schindler saved a little over 1,000 Jews by sending them to Brunlitz. At Brunlitz, he bribed the guards not to harm the Jews, and they were subsequently liberated by the Soviets. This is another memorial to the victims of Gross-Rosen, with a dedication to Władysław Wądziński. He was a Polish priest who died in the camp. Wądziński was later beatified by Pope John Paul II. We've now come to the far end of camp, where there is a field scattered with remains of barracks. A nearby sign reads, the Auschwitz part. In the second half of 1944, on church grounds bordering with the camp, started building of new two-storied bricked blocks. This part was called Auschwitz because originally these barracks were prepared for prisoners evacuated from Auschwitz camp. From the old camp, it was fenced with wire netting. Only 20 of 30 planned barracks were built under construction, without windows, doors, floors, and heating, till the end of K.L. Gross-Rosen's existence. In 1944 and 1945, there were placed prisoners evacuated from different camps. Nearby is a standing barrack that has an exhibition inside, including examples of three-tiered bunks prisoners had to crowd onto to sleep. Prisoners were given metal tags with their prisoner number stamped on them. These were attached to string and worn around the neck. This one belonged to prisoner number 14295. This is a view near the main gate, looking back to where we've just traveled from. If you look closely right back here, that's the only standing barrack that remains, which we were just in. Back in the museum is a model of what the camp would have looked like when it was up and running. To the far left is the SS camp. The main gate is right here. The roll call square, the kitchen building. Right here is the bell tower. All of these rectangular buildings are barracks. The crematorium, and then this area on the far side of the camp, which was known as the Auschwitz camp. I can still vividly remember the day I visited Gross-Rosen. It was in December, and despite it being a sunny day with blue skies, it was bitterly cold and windy. I could only briefly take my hand out of my thick glove to snap pictures on my camera before my fingers would turn numb from the cold. Despite wearing layers of clothes, wool socks, and double gloves, it was still cold. It was then that I thought about all of those who once were held captured here, their days of long physical labor, their striped uniforms and wooden clogs, their lack of food, their hard wooden bunks, their lack of medicine for illnesses, and yet they persevered. When I shifted my thoughts to what these men and women suffered through, I realized how insignificant my personal comfort was in comparison.